burned on the table, and Dalinar burned the end of his napkin in it, sending a small braid of pungent smoke into the air. Stupid decorative candles. What was the point? Looking pretty? Didn't they use spheres because they were better than candles for light in the first place? Well, not apparently in the middle of the feast, or not apparently in the minds of the feast decorators. At a glare from Gavilar, Dalinar stopped burning his napkin and leaned back, nursing a mug of deep violet wine, the kind you could smell from across the room, potent and flavorful, not too sweet and with a kick. Outside the feast hall, a storm raged like a madman locked away, impotent and ignored. But how do you deal with high storms, Bright Lord? Toe asked Gavilar. The tall, golden-haired Westerner sat at the high table of the stone feast hall, which was far too warm in Dalinar's opinion. Too many candles, maybe. Sweat prickled on his arms and forehead. He swished his wine in his mug. Good planning keeps an army from needing to be out during a storm, except in rare situations, Gavilar explained. Holdings in Alethkar are frequent. If a campaign takes longer than anticipated, we can split the army and retreat back to a number of those towns for shelter. And if you're in the middle of a siege, Toe asked, or if you're being pursued? Sieges? Gavilar laughed. These are the Stormlands, Lord Toe. What is there to besiege? Surely there are cities with fortifications, Toe said. Your famed Kholinar has majestic walls, does it not? In the shadow of a stone cliff, I hear, quite dramatic. The Westerner had a thick accent and kept drawing out his O and ah sounds. Sounded silly to Dalinar. You're forgetting about soulcasters, Gavilar said. Long sieges are pointless. You can't starve out a city, at least not its soldiers, while there are soulcasters and emeralds to make food. Important cities in Alethkar have stores against this sort of thing. No, we either break down the walls quickly, or more commonly, we just seize the high ground above the city and win the battle that way. Toe nodded, seeming fascinated. Soulcasters, he said. We have not these things in Rira or Iri. Fascinating, fascinating. And so many shards here. Perhaps half the world's wealth in blade and plate, all contained in these Vorin states. One wonders if the heralds themselves favor you. Dalinar snorted softly, then took a long pull on his wine. Outside, thunder shook the bunker. The ice storm was in full force now. Inside, however, servants brought out slabs of pork and lonka claws for the men, cooked in a savory broth. The women dined elsewhere, including, supposedly, Toe's sister, though Dalinar had not yet met her. The western light-eyed woman had arrived barely an hour before the storm hit, along with her brother. The hall was soon clogged with the sounds of people chatting. Dalinar tore into his lonka claws, cracking them with the bottom of his mug and biting out the meat. This feast seemed too polite. Where was the music, the laughter, the women, eating in separate rooms? Life had been different these last few years of conquest. The final four high princes stood firm in their unified front. The once frantic fighting had stalled. More and more of Gavilar's time was required by the administration of his kingdom, half as big as they wanted it to be, but still demanding. Politics. Gavilar and Sadeas didn't make Dalinar play at it too often, but he still had to sit at feasts like this one, rather than dining with his men as he would have preferred. He sucked on a claw, watching Gavilar talk to the foreigner. Storms. Gavilar actually looked regal with that beard combed and glowing gemstones on his fingers. He wore a suit of the newer style, formal and rigid. Dalinar instead wore his takama and an overshirt. He wore his takama and an overshirt that went down to mid-thigh, his chest bare, as was proper. Sadeas held court with a group of lesser light-eyes at a table across the hall. Every one of that group had been carefully chosen as men with uncertain loyalties. Light-eyes who had surrendered quickly or had risen to power because of the culling of the Alethi rampage through Alethkar. Men that Gavilar and Sadeas thought might be trouble, and whom Sadeas wanted to feel out. If this feast progressed like others, he'd single out individuals to talk to, persuade, and convince. Others he'd find ways to eliminate. Not assassins, usually. They all found that sort of thing distasteful. It just wasn't the Alethi way.